morning, guys. If I haven't had the opportunity to meet you, my name is Jared Weston. I'm Area Director for CBMC Columbus, and if you didn't know it, we're at our monthly coffee connection. So every month we get together and do this. Just get together with like-minded men, and then we get to celebrate. We get to hear another man's testimony, the incredible work that the Lord has done in and through him, and what that looks like lived out. At home, in the workplace, in the community, and we got a good one today. I can say that every month because we're all there. His story lived out through us, but I'm excited for you to hear from Joe. But before we do, I'm just going to kind of run through why we're here, why we do what we do, and we couldn't do what we do if it weren't for our business partners. So where's Josh? It's hard to miss. He's a good guy. Where are you, Josh? There he is. Thank you, Josh, for your support and all that you do in the community. Guys, every month, every time we get together, I want to share this because it's not just what we do, but why we do it that matters. And our mission is to reach, empower, and deploy generations of men to live out their faith and multiply their impact for Christ in the workplace. And the way that we do it, we've got different outreaches. We do this, but guys, we're just trying to help you realize that you are where you are on purpose, and to help you realize that purpose and live it out. There's guys doing discipleship, one-on-one discipleship in their office. They're doing Bible studies in their office. There's guys tithing from their gross revenue of their business. And that's all great, but it doesn't happen alone. And I always tell guys that in order to lead others well, in order to live out their faith in the workplace, you first got to lead yourself well. And everything that we do is designed to help encourage you in that and surround you with guys who can do that with you. Operation Timothy, one-on-one discipleship, the heartbeat of everything that we do is just to help walk with men into the presence of the Lord and let the Holy Spirit do what only it can do. You can see that as those little dots, they're getting bigger because there's more guys saying yes. Yes, let me post something in my office. Yes, I just opened a coffee shop in a community space. Can we do something like this here? We're launching Gehenna Coffee Connection tomorrow. There's hints. Where's Dwayne? There he is. Chandler Ingles not here, but there's prayers going up for something in Plain City. Dwayne. But we'll see what comes from that. But guys, it's not our ability or our equipping, it's our willingness that the Lord is looking for. So I'm not going to go through all of these. There's an opportunity at the end. If you want more information, there's a QR code you can scan. There's information over there by the coffee. Just know that there's a variety of ways to get plugged in, to get connected, to grow in your faith, and to grow in the community. And we're going to see. Okay, for those that have been here the last few months, you know this gets me every time that thing changes. I can't get that darn slide to stay. I think I fixed it. We'll see. But our leadership prayer is coming up in a month. It's hard to believe. We got 2 weeks left of registration, so if you're interested, if you're thinking about it, we got 2 weeks. We still have room, but we've got a panel of Christian business leaders that are going to share what does it look like to lead with faith. What are the key principles? What are the moments that led them to lead their organizations by faith? And Jim Murphy, awesome story, just released another book on how to live the best possible life. Really powerful, but he works with Olympians, professional athletes, and it's all about that inner excellence. We have everything that we need to do what the Lord has called us to do. We just have to realize it, receive it, and then start to live it out. That's enough of me, but like I said, 2 weeks to register if you haven't already. We talk about the power of an invite all the time, and who knows what one invitation might lead to in someone's life. So, without further ado, I'm going to welcome up Joe Huber, our speaker today. Joe and I got connected a year or so ago, and he actually spoke at Canal, Winchester Coffee Connection, earlier this year. And I'm like, we got to get you on the speaking rotation to share this story. So, Joe, I'll let you take it away, man.
Appreciate it, brother. All right, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it. See a lot of friendly faces. Some I haven't got to say hi to yet, so make sure I see you afterwards. But I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to share what the Lord's done in my life, kind of what He's doing now, and hopefully encourage some brothers here. Who thinks about risk when it comes to their business? We're a room full of business guys. Let's see it. Yeah, everyone, right? What about risk when it comes to your faith? Do we think about risk when it comes to our faith, taking a risk for the king, for the kingdom? I'm going to make the argument today through some of my story that we should be taking risks for the kingdom, that our faith is not made to be lived in comfort, but that our lives are made to be poured out, and a big piece of that is taking risk and seeing the Lord move in mighty ways. So that's where we're headed today. I'm going to start with begin with the end in mind. This is my family here. I am the richest man in the world, and it's got nothing to do with money. I've got the most amazing wife and 3 awesome kids. And by the grace of God, we are trying to break some family trends. We're trying to break the generational curses that came before us. And that's something we talk about really intentionally in our family. So I grew up, I had a pretty normal childhood up to about 13, 14 years old. I thought it was normal anyway. I had a stay-at-home dad. I had 2 younger brothers. And with a stay-at-home dad and 2 younger brothers and a mom that's not around much at all, that's just raised by wolves. I had a frequent flyer, punch card at the ER. 4 concussions, 3 broken bones, stitches 7 times, and a medically induced coma by my 18th birthday, and we just thought that was all normal. But it was great. I mean, loved it, right? We were always, going and, I don't know, just doing stupid stuff. Hey, watch this, that's how all good stories start. And so then I ended up hearing the gospel for the first time in middle school. One of my middle school teachers brought everyone into the room of the gym, after hours on a Friday night. It was $2, and it was all you can eat pizza, and all the girls you want to be there were there. And he'd, while you're chasing the girls or whatever, you'd get the pizza, and then he'd line you up in the gym, and he'd start sharing Romans Road, and I stand at the door and knock, and all the stuff. And that's the first time I heard the gospel, and I prayed a prayer, and it took a long time for really understand what that meant. But it was a teacher that first shared the gospel with me when I was in middle school. And then a friend invited me to go to church, and I said, yeah, sure, I'd like to do that. And then I started hearing that I should get baptized. And so I decided I was going to get baptized. And that is when a hand grenade got dropped into my seemingly normal family. This was right around the same time my mom had moved her office home. She was a one-man show CPA, and I didn't see her hardly at all for the first kind of 12 years. And when I got baptized, she had an absolute breakdown. Mental health deteriorated, and it came out about a year later that she was raped in a Baptist church when she was 9 years old. She'd repressed it for 30 years. She didn't know, she didn't remember. And it was a sick, evil, demonic thing tied to when she got baptized at 9 years old. And so all of a sudden, all of this, she was the provider for our family. She was the sole breadwinner. And her mental health just crumbled. She couldn't work anymore. My parents ended up losing the house 5 years later, but also my house started becoming a place that was unsafe. I started to hear things like, this is your fault, you did this to me. I had dealt with this. I told you not to get baptized, but you went and did it anyway. Now our family is suffering because of you. And then later it escalated, and I started hearing things like, why did you do this? This is your fault. I'm going to go to a pawn shop, buy a gun, and put a bullet in your brain. And there were times when she would try to end her life, and I remember at 15 years old, I didn't have a driver's license yet. She jerked the car into a telephone pole, and it was still drivable. So my dad and I drove, and I got in her car, and he drove her home in his car, and that was just life. That's just what you did, right? And this went on till about 16, 17 years old, and then I met this family that changed my life. They lived a life of radical generosity, and immediately from the first time, my best friend in high school, his mom, she used to say that it was like the Lord knit my soul to yours, and I knew that I was supposed to care for you. And so she opened up her home and took me in, and I lived with them for about 2 years. And that's when I really first started getting discipled. I'd maybe made a prayer, a dedication to Jesus earlier, but that's when I started getting discipled and started seeing what it looks like to live intentionally, right? To want to share your faith, to read the Bible every day, to live a life dedicated to prayer, and to really dedicate your whole life to Christ. And that radical generosity that they shared changed my life. My life will never be the same because this family did something that was so countercultural. We live in a society dedicated to comfort and take that next trip and eat that next cool restaurant. And they opened their home and brought this, you heard my story. I was a train wreck, right? But they brought me in and said, hey, you're one of us. You're one of the family. And I remember trying to do dishes to earn my keep, and I'd be shaking. And she jokes that I broke every dish in the house, seemingly, because I was trying to load the dishwasher and all of that, right? And that's when I first got exposed to real estate. So I'm a real estate guy and have a real estate company, but it didn't start like that. And so I ended up getting a need-based scholarship to go to Ohio State. We tried to love and serve Ohio State well, and got to see a lot of people come to the Lord, and then graduated Ohio State and met Emily pretty, right around that same time. I got married the year after right after I graduated, and took a job in medical sales. And this is kind of weaving back to the business story. I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I know Lois, the woman who took me in, her family, she was a realtor, and so she started collecting houses on campus. And so in the summers, we'd fix them up. We'd, add bedrooms to basements and garages, and anywhere you can, shoehorn another student in there and they'll pay an extra $300 rent. That's campus for you, right? And so I started learning about that. Why are we doing that? Well, you can increase the value and all the, the whole real estate thing. So I didn't know what I was supposed to do, but I knew that I was supposed to live a life radically different for Jesus. And so it started with a job in sales that worked for about 1.5 years, and I got laid off. My wife and I had just bought our first little rental. It was a 1,100 square foot Cape Cod, and we had big plans that we were going to collect maybe 10 houses would be arriving. That's where I set my dream. Today we own and manage 2,000 apartments across 6 states. I never dreamed it'd be anything bigger than I hoped I could make, $75,000 a year, $80,000 a year, so my wife could stay home with kids. That's what she wanted. She wanted to stay home with these tiny little adorable savages. And so that's where I set my goal. And so for the first 5 years of my career, I've been doing this about 13 years in real estate. The first 5 years of my career, I was chasing that goal. And so we ended up buying a single family flip at a house in a garage sale in German Village. We were walking around, and I was feeling dangerous. I was armed with podcasts, and so I saw these guys cleaning out a house, and I walked over and said, hey, I see you're selling that dresser, but can I buy that house from you? And they said, sure, give me $150,000 and it's yours. I was like, deal. My wife's like, what are you doing? I have no idea. Just go with it. And so we, raised capital, $4,000 a time from people from church or people I used to caddy for at the country club. Sure, I trust you. Here's $2,000. So that's, we bought that house, and 1 turned to 3, turned to 10, turned to 30. I ended up buying a Vespa scooter and driving around town, every street in the Short North, Old Town, Wineland Park, all these hot up-and-coming Columbus neighborhoods. And I cold called every rundown property. It felt like in Columbus. My goal was to make 100 cold calls a day, and I did that for 5 years. And then we had an army of people that were, like a fleet of Vespas that were, you could park them anywhere. You buy them for $800. And so we just had an army of people that were combing the streets looking for rundown properties. And again, the goal was still, I wanted to provide for my family. And I knew I wanted to live for Jesus. I knew I wanted to provide for my family, but I didn't have any dreams bigger than that. And so I woke up about 5 years later in 2019. We had a 2-year-old. We had Eli at the time, who 2-year-old boys, man, all they want to do is wrestle and pull your hair and punch you in the face and call it love. But so I woke up 5 years later, and we had about 80 doors of scattered site multifamily, 2 units, 4 units, 12 units. We had 12 Airbnbs. We had 20 guys on payroll for a construction company. We had 3 realtors that were working on our team, and my partner and I were working, the realtor game as well. And a partridge in a pear tree, right? We were still making 100 calls a guy on a Vespa scooter, and I was trying to do it all. And I was, I think the lesson for me that I learned when you're in entrepreneurship, early on you get rewarded by saying yes. Right? Do you do that? Absolutely. Airbnbs, we'll do that too. Construction, yeah, of course we do third-party construction. And you say yes to everything, and that's how you put food on the table, right? It's how you keep the lights on, and that's good. And later in entrepreneurship, you get paid to say no. You narrow down your scope, and you say, we do that better than anyone else. And that was my story too, right? We learned the hard way from that. But about 2019, we had 5 closings one week, and every project was going sideways, and I decided I was going to be super dad and get on the floor and start wrestling with that 2-year-old boy. And I thought I was crushing it, and I had no energy in the tank, and he could see it. And it was like the Lord woke me up. This little kid put his hand on my shoulder. He looked me, dead in the eyes, looking into my soul. He said, "Daddy, it's all going to be okay." And I realized that I was missing it, right? That my goal of making $80,000 a year so Emily could stay home with kids, that goal had come and gone. The businesses were doing far more than that, but I was going to miss the important things. And I was on danger of maybe being like my mom, that was never around, that she worked 6 days a week and would maybe be around sometimes on Sunday if she could figure it out. And I know that that's not what the Lord has for my life. And so a mentor of mine, as I was talking through this, said, there's only 2 responsibilities that you have in this life that no one else can do for you. Someone else can lead that Bible study. Someone else can start that business. Someone else can help run that ministry. Only you can be a father to those kids and a husband to that woman. And there's no other calling on your life that's more important than that. And so that shook me. And so we were, sort of wrestling with God. What do you want for me? Right? What am I supposed to do? You've given me this passion for real estate. You've given me this passion for building businesses. I love the people that we're building up and giving opportunity to. How do I live my life for you? Right? Everything's on the table, and everything was on the table in 2019, 2020. And I felt like when I was wrestling with God, He said, "I've given you these skills, talents, and gifts. Don't neglect your family. Don't neglect your wife. But lean in, go, the first one you built for your family, and that was good. Now go build the next one for me and for the kingdom." And so that's what we tried to do. And so at that point, we had 80 units of, 80 apartments, and we were trying to figure out what's next. And so, this was the first time I really took a big risk for the kingdom. And I sold everything, and I put half the money over here and said, this will provide for my family if we lose all this half, that we're gonna just spend it down and see if we can get this thing off the ground. And so we started trying to cold call bigger apartment communities. We started trying to cold call 100 to 200 unit communities instead of these 2s and 4s and 10s that we were looking at. And I had no idea if it was going to work. I had no idea if those people sell properties to yahoos like this guy, right? You show up on a Vespa scooter. But also we set a new core values. And so our North Star number 1 was, to whom much is given, much is expected. And that was a giving mandate. We give 20% of our profits away to faith-based nonprofits. And that just became, we put it out there, we made a commitment, we're gonna do this. And something so interesting happened as a result of that. That North Star, that giving mandate, that trying to live life a little radically different, the company, me, the team, we are far more enriched by that giving mandate than we ever would have been had we not done it. And I'm talking, normally you say, oh, richer than money, all of that, like I did the cute little trait, richest man in the world. But I'm talking, we have been so blessed financially because of that giving mandate. We've had every step of the way, I have 3 resources. We have people, properties, and capital. And at every stage of that, sellers of properties have said, yeah, that guy offered me $10 million, you only offered us $8 million, I'm gonna go with you anyway. I don't really know that Jesus guy, but my parents did, and they gave me these properties, and I just think I'm supposed to sell it to you anyway. Non-believers are taking 20% haircuts on pricing because, well, I mean, I don't know, I just feel like I'm supposed to sell it to you anyway. You know, we've had team that had, billions of dollars of transactional experience join our tiny little, $50 million worth of real estate transactional experience saying, yeah, I'm going to take a 50% pay cut. I'm sick of building that guy's balance sheet. You'll get me where we need to go eventually. But, in the meantime, I'm going to join your team. I'm really all about your mission. And not just one, like many, like several people. And we've gotten their pay up. That's a big, you got to do that. But they've gotten their pay up. Those guys are building the business with their experience and all of that. They graciously let me keep my name on the door these days. Investors came to us and said, yeah, I used to invest with so-and-so, but I don't know, he's kind of a jerk, and I kind of like your gospel stuff, and I kind of like your give back stuff, right? Some people it's gospel, some people it's, I just like that you put good energy out in the room, and we have some conversations about that too, We're not trying to put good energy out in the room, we're trying to share the name of Jesus. And I'm sure we've isolated people and other people have been turned off by it, but I can stand here today that since we took those risks for the gospel, I'm a far wealthier man, both in all the intangible ways and in all the tangible ways. And I want to say this is not some, sowed seeds, prosperity gospel, because that's not how it works, right? God's not after, formulas, if, then. He's after our hearts. I've just seen the man I've become, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Not where your heart is, there your treasure will be. The act of giving transforms you and your innermost being. And I think it makes you a person that other people want to follow. And that's how I've seen it most, is that as we've done that, team can buy into the mission, and they buy into you as a leader more because they see you as a generous human being. I talk a lot about, how do you influence people? And I think the biggest way you can influence people is to convince them that you care about them. And here's the secret to convincing people you care about them. You have to actually care about them. Because we all have BS meters, and they all go up right away. And as soon as it's, well, I'll care about you, but you gotta, nope. Wrong. We're not doing that. We don't play those games, right? That feels icky. You feel like a used car, you're at a used car lot. Sorry if there's any car guys in the room. But so I think that's what happens is when you genuinely care about people, when you see them as, image bearers of God, created for big things in His kingdom, then you can respect them, you can care about them. They're made in His image, and then it just flows, it just happens, it just works, and that's been my experience. So that's been the last kind of 6 years of what we've built. Guys, my only goal was to make $80,000 a year so Emily could stay home and raise those 3 amazing kids. I never dreamed it would turn into this. I never dreamed it'd be what it is today. I also think that we're not called to sit on our laurels and not take risks, right? The American dream is a dream of comfort. It's a dream of, let's go to the fanciest place we can afford and do the coolest stuff with the most amazing people and find people just like you and never get outside your comfort zone. And I really think that is not how God wants us to live our lives. I think we are called to take risk, whether they're financial risks, emotional risks, relational risks. Because when we take risks, that's where we need God to show up, right? If we're living a life of comfort, if we're out of the fight, out of the war, we're talking about a war for people's souls, right? Where are they going to spend eternity? And we've been given, the armor of God. We got to take risks, and we got to trust the King to come through. And the beauty of it is that's where you see Him, and that's where your faith is deepened in the foxhole. When you take that risk, when you say, I'm going to whatever, and I need God to come through. I need Him, because we don't have a choice. And so that's my challenge. And so I'm, practice what I'm preaching up here. Where I'm being challenged in the business is not just go make a bunch of money and give it away over here, or try to make a bunch of money. It's an interesting time in real estate. we're not selling deals right now, it's buy mode, but we're not trying to just go make a bunch of money and give it. I've been challenged by some of our investors. They've got, second chance employment, and they're using the gospel, using their business for the gospel. And, 200 employees that came out of incarceration or inpatient addiction therapy and that kind of stuff. And, so one of the things I'm wrestling with the Lord with is, how do we bring the gospel into our apartment communities? We've got 2,000 families that live in our communities across 6 states. But we've also got some investors that say, hey, we want market rate returns. How do we do that, right? We could put live-in missionaries as a drag on property performance, but that's not going to be right for our investors, right? That's not fair to them. So how do we do it in a way that, the gospel goes forward and it enhances performance, that it, renewal rates are increased, that, their communities are built and people are staying longer and treating the property better, and bad debt goes down and collections go up and all that kind of stuff. So those are the things that we're wrestling with the Lord on now, about how do we use this platform he's given us for the kingdom, for the gospel. Because, I think at the end of the day, this is, Jared, I definitely didn't just remember I had slides and trying to work them in now. This has been one of the most meaningful passages in my life, and it's about laying it all at his feet. It's Revelations 4, it's the throne room of God. John's called up and he gets a vision of just the pinnacle of glory, the throne room of God. And at once I was in the Spirit, and there before me was a throne in heaven, and someone was sitting on it. And the one who sat there had the appearance of jasper and ruby. A rainbow shone like emerald encircling the throne. Surrounding the throne were 24 other thrones, and seated on them were 24 elders. And they were dressed in white and had crowns of gold on their heads. From the throne came flashes of lightning, rumblings and peals of thunder. In front of the throne were 7 lamps. The 7 lamps were blazing. These are the 7 spirits of God. Whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who sits on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him who sits on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever. They lay their crowns before the throne and they say, "You are worthy, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power. For you created all things, and by your will they were created and have their being." These guys are in the pinnacle of glory. There's just lightning ripping off the throne. The glory cannot be contained. And these guys have been elevated to positions of power, of influence, of wealth. They take those crowns off their head and they lay them before the throne. And that crown's not just their money, it's their everything, right? It's their subjects, it's their symbol of authority, it's everything they've been given by him and for him. And I would make the case that we all have crowns. Every man in this room is a man of influence. There's someone that's looking up to you. We all have, wealth and families and all kinds of different things that we're being put in charge of, and he's given them to us to take the crowns off our head and lay it at his feet. And I think the interesting thing about that, when you do that, lay your life down at the foot of the throne, you get far more, right? The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it, for he founded it on the seas and established it on the waters. It's all his anyway. Right? We don't own a thing. And, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. Right? Then he called the crowd to him, along with his disciples, said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny himself, take up their cross, and follow me. And whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Whoever loses their life for my sake and for the gospel will save it." And it's this magical transaction that happens, that the more we lay our lives down, the more we're overwhelmed with his joy, right? The more we give, the more we have. And you can't outgive God in that way, right? When we lay our lives down more fully, we just get more of him to take it up. And there's nothing better. He's the treasure buried in the field. And so I'm on this journey with you guys, right? This is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to figure out how to lay my life down more by his grace, and in doing so, experience that joy that can't be described, that he's promised. So I appreciate you guys having me up here. Appreciate you guys listening to my story. Hopefully there's someone encouraged. I'd love to connect afterwards. If you want to chat, I'd love to share more. So appreciate you guys. I appreciate you.
was kind of convicted this morning, just that we're month after month, we get everyone together, and there's a lot of guys in this room that are walking by faith, that are leading well, that are using their influence for kingdom impact, which is awesome. But there's also a lot of guys that have questions about faith. How do I do this well? Am I even supposed to do it? And so I just wanted to encourage you guys this morning. Go figure. The verse of the day, the version, is from Romans 10:17, and it says, "Consequently, faith comes from hearing the message, and the message is heard through the word about Christ." Earlier in that Romans 10:9 says, "If you believe in your heart that Jesus is Lord, and declare with your mouth, or if you declare with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved." Right? John 14:6, Jesus said to the disciples from Christ, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." Right? Like, there is no other way but through Christ. It's not, we don't earn it, we certainly don't deserve it, but we're called to share it. And so as Joe shared, he heard the gospel, and the Spirit moved and drew him to it. And then Lois, they brought him in, lived out the gospel, right? Like, so if you've heard it, if you've received it, it's time to live it out and share it, right? So if you're unsure what that looks like, talk about it at the table. Come see me. There's a lot of guys in here that would love to talk to you about that. And so before we jump into some table time, I'm just going to pray again for anyone who's kind of, maybe you're on the fence or not sure what it looks like or not sure what you believe, that you would take that step, that you would risk whatever that fear might be, that you just lay it down. So, Heavenly Father, I just thank you for who you are. I thank you for the air in our lungs, our able bodies to be here. Those are all gifts and blessings from you, Father. I thank you for Joe. I thank you for the way that you used a very challenging situation to glorify you. I thank you for those. I thank you for the family that poured into him, that planted and watered seeds so that he can be the man, the husband, the father, the leader that he is today. Lord, I pray that everyone in this room that heard that saw that the gospel lived out, that you move in their hearts today, give them a revelation of yourself. Help them to see that one person in the office, in the gym, in the neighborhood, whatever that might look like, Lord, who needs that touch, and give them the words, give them the courage to share, Lord, the love, the grace, the forgiveness, the hope, joy, the salvation that comes through your Son, Jesus. Father, thank you for this time. Bless this conversation and send these men out on purpose. In Jesus' name.